The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
So payments part 2. We're going to chat a little bit about the overview today. Readings, of course, as we always do. And then what was yesterday? Does anybody want to tell me what yesterday was? Kelly? 10th anniversary of Bitcoin. The white baby. What else was yesterday? It was Halloween. No, it is not my birthday again. Stop that, Tom. So we're going to chat a little bit. We're going to have some fun about happy anniversary or birthday. Would you call it a birthday or anniversary? Anniversary? Okay. Birthday. All right. There's no established vocabulary really in this field. So. What's that? The birthday. Hugo, why does the birthday come in January?
Birthday marks death, so music's gonna die today.
Raheem?
Birth means death at a point in time in my mind. So anniversary maybe is better.
All right. Did you get that? Birth also connotes death. Did I have that? And so Raheem is saying she would go with anniversary, but we have birth over here. We're going to chat a little bit about that and try the existential. And then we're going to talk about payment systems and sort of some of the pain points. And we'll have a lively discussion. What do you think the pain points are in the payment system? I of course, will have listed some, but your input's the most important. How does blockchain fit into this payment system? And why, so far, haven't there been any really economy-wide or system-wide adoptions yet? So one might even say, what are the pain points of blockchain technology that there has not yet been some of those adoptions? We're going to chat a little bit about some blockchain payment companies, and there are not many. I mean, there are many white papers, but there are not many that have actually taken off. And then wrap it up. So the study questions, which we're going to sort of dig into rather than right now, but just, what lessons can be taken so far? Might layer 2 help us? We're going to come back to these when we sort of dig into the pain points. What are the opportunities in cross-border and so forth, and the trade-offs of using permission versus permissionless systems. So, happy anniversary, happy birthday for some, 10 years ago. It's remarkable. Actually, some people say it was November 1st because I think when it actually got on the website, it was November 1st in parts of the world. So, what do we know about the 10th anniversary? These just some fun statistics. This has all happened in 10 years. So the price is around $6,300 of Bitcoin. Out of nothing, Satoshi Nakamoto, and it's $110 billion in size. We might not all know each other in 10 years, but write down for yourself on a piece of paper. This is a real exercise I'm asking you to do for yourself. Write down for yourself and put this piece of paper somewhere, or put it on your laptop. You can put it down. Where do you think the price of Bitcoin will be 10 years from today on the 20th anniversary? And remember this course in 10 years and look back and laugh at yourself, right? Just, we won't all know each other. Maybe there'll be a group chat. But what's that, Aline? You don't want to guess where it is? You don't need to share it with me. No, but write down and think about it. Where do you think this will be in 10 years? This is a hard question. Well, Alpha, do you want to share your number with the class?
No, we're even just debating directionally. It's really going to be higher or lower.
Well, how many people think it will be lower in 10 years? Okay, I'd say it's about 35%. How many higher? Yeah, it's about 65%. Aline, the two Alines split, right?
think it's gonna be 0.
I think that would be lower.
Depends on what it is, because in 10 years the system might change so dramatically it might be unfair to even call it Bitcoin 10 years from now.
Fair enough. It might have evolved into something else. Who on the back here, please?
I just want to comment. Isn't the real question like market cap? Because that's what people are actually using the currency for. Because the question like what's the price going to be presupposes a set number of shares or coins or tokens. Sure. So the way that people are mining coins in the future also depends on the price.
So I think you raise a really good question. If you're writing something down, you could write down the market cap rather than the price. You could say, I mean, in Aline's case, he would still say 0 for both. But you might say that, of course, because it depends on how many coins there are, how many shares there are. Does anybody want to take the other side from the other Aline?
I think it will have zeros in it.
What's
It will
that?
have zeros in the price.
It will have zeros in the price. Hugo?
Well, just in response to the other comment, right? We know exactly how many Bitcoin there will be in about 10 years from now.
Do we actually know how many Bitcoin there will be in 10 years?
Yes.
Hugo says you do because it's written into code. Remind me your first name? Isaac.
So I think 2 points. One is mining. I know that some folks may have a better technical background on mining and the way you dedicate resources based on price, but I'm seeing a shake of the head, so maybe not. The other piece of it, I think, is just thinking about the flow, right? Thinking about the Bitcoin that's actually being traded or transacted. If there's a restricted market cap, it's similar to looking at big cap stocks trading in China. You know, you don't actually get a real price.
Well, I agree with those. There's one other reason we might not know
They could stop mining
people could stop mining.
in 5 years if it's 0.
Oh, that's if it really just dwindles out and nobody wants to expend. But what's one other reason why it could be a different number than Shimon? A fork, right. There could be a consensus amongst 51% of the parties on this node to change the, what I'll call monetary policy. We've seen that twice in Ethereum. Ethereum was having a certain mining or block reward. They cut it in half once, or they cut it from 5 to 3, and I think now they're going from 3 to 2. It was not in the original Ethereum. So there could be a consensus. It's not written about a lot, but it could be either what's called a fork, or it could be so almost unanimous that everybody went for a change in the monetary policy. All right, so that's just a little bit of fun. Some other quick numbers and facts. There's 17.3 million coins right now in this. So 17 million coins have been mined so far. 550,000 blocks, roughly. 189 gigs. Transactions per day, 250,000 transactions. And then if I've got my decimals right, the hash rate is 10 to the 18th times 50. That's 7 trillion times harder than when it was in 2009. There's 7 trillion more computational power in Bitcoin now than there was 9 or 10 years ago. It takes about 1/3 of 1% of the world's electricity. There were some nice comments overnight in the discussion for this class about whether that's a good thing or not, and maybe it's not a good thing. But so that's Bitcoin anniversary. A couple other things. Unique addresses. There's a little bit over 500,000 unique addresses, Bitcoin addresses. So if there's tens of millions of people that have Bitcoin and only 500,000 Bitcoin addresses, what does it mean about the probably 20 or 30 million people that believe they own Bitcoin but don't have a Bitcoin address? Where do they own it? Anyone? James?
On an exchange?
Yeah, on an exchange. Or in some custodial, in essence, relying on somebody else. If there's 500,000 unique addresses, but it's thought there's 20 to 30 million accounts. 10,000 nodes. So BitNodes is a website where you can see where the nodes are. And it's concentration of where the actual nodes are. So pretty spread around. There's not any alpha in Ethiopia yet. In fact, I don't see. What's that? Do you see 2 in Kenya?
I see the dots.
Anybody from Greenland? No. And of course, it's spurred this whole thing. We've seen this map before, but initial coin offerings, $28 billion roughly raised. Again, we don't know if the numbers are right, but this is what this 10-year anniversary, or 10 years since it all started. This means there's a lot of capital chasing this field right now. Does anybody want to write down whether they think ICOs are still going to be around in 10 years? How many people think initial coin offerings will be around? About half. And so the other, I know where Aline is, but where the rest of you? I don't actually know. I think they're going to slow down. I think in 2019 and 2020 they'll slow down because so many will have failed. There'll be more, the market will sort of adjust and say, well, we're not going to invest in these unless there's a much better business model. And so it's spurred, this is just a bucket of other coins. There's 1,600 altcoins, probably 1,500 plus of them will fail, or maybe all 1,600, but 1,500 plus will probably fail. I might be done with, crypto finance. We're actually, there's not as much volatility as there once was. We're slowly getting a more stable coin. It doesn't mean it will stay this way. But to the extent that Bitcoin stabilizes in pricing and stabilizes for a long period, there might be a little bit more use of it. But I wouldn't read. 6 months does not make enough history to say that there's really volatilities out of this thing. All right, so let's go back to payment systems. So then I'm going to ask, what are the pain points? I mean, maybe just putting up the chart tells you where the pain points are, but this was the chart we talked about Tuesday as to what some of the challenges are. Anybody want to give me some thoughts on this? This was a consumer on one end and a consumer on the other end. It happens to be a U.S. model, but it's not that different in most countries. But what pain points could blockchain help address in this complex system? So, pain points. Anybody want to give me, Brodish?
There are too many intermediaries in the system, which means that too many parallel ledgers.
All right, so multiple intermediaries with parallel ledgers. What else?
I guess the usual suspect would be high costs.
So high cost, usual suspect. World Bank estimates it's between 0.5% and 1% of world GDP, which would be, I guess, about $400 to $800 billion a year. Zon?
Speed of execution.
Speed of execution. So what do you mean when you say speed of execution in payments?
I guess the ability for a counterparty to receive the money and be able to spend it quickly.
So that final settlement, sometimes it's authorization, clearing, settlement, but final settlement often doesn't occur for a couple of days.
Yeah. But I would add, like, for the customer perspective, it just occurs in 3 seconds.
So it's a really interesting, there's a bifurcated market. From the customer's perspective, there's great speed of settlement. For the merchant side, the merchant might not have that, is what you're highlighting. Sorry, Ian.
So there are a lot of hurdles for the unbanked. Like, if I have never had a bank account, like with a financial institution, it's very difficult for me to go through all these processes.
Right. So financial inclusion. So we had cost, financial inclusion, latency, at least for the merchant side. Lots of intermediaries, as Brodish said. There's a lot of ledgers that are multiple ledgers that might have some reconciliation and cost to them. Sure, Sean.
Real-time FX settlement.
Real-time FX settlement. What do you mean there?
So when you have like one kind of currency, you basically can convert the currency for the US if you have the US dollar or the Russian ruble, and then if you can pledge that in one kind of cryptocurrency, you can actually use that as a unionized token. You can settle the trade right away.
So I think I'm with you. It's basically cross-border, jumping from one currency, one fiat currency to another, which happens to be technically jumping from one ledger system, the US dollar ledger system. Did you say ruble? Ruble. Do they have ledgers there? Yeah, they have ledgers there. You know, as a background story, I used to attend the Financial Stability Board meetings in Switzerland from time to time. And when Russia was going to have the next G20 meeting, I think it's next going to be in Argentina, but that was the year it was going to be in Russia, the deputy governor of the central bank wanted to have a dive into issues that were in my area, the derivative space. So I got to know something about it. They do have ledgers, is what I just want to say. I did know this. What are some of the things? I heard from you: cost, delayed settlement, especially for the merchant side. I didn't hear anybody talk about chargebacks. So does anybody want to tell me about why merchants are not happy about what's called chargebacks? Or is this something more a U.S. thing? Brodish?
So we saw in the last class that out of $100, $2.75 was being given to different multiple intermediaries, like the issuing bank and the authorizing.
So there's a lot of cost, 2 3/4% in the U.S. when it's across the credit card rails. But one of the features is chargebacks.
There's just a lack of finality to the transaction. So I think you talked about the example with the campaign. After the campaign was over, having people claiming the charges were fraud or whatever, and having to give back funds.
Right. So merchants don't really have finality, Jack.
But sometimes chargebacks are recourse for things that weren't actually spent. So doesn't this kind of affect, like, consumers might not be as willing to enter a transaction that has that level of finality?
All right. So I think, remind me your first name? Dan. So Dan and Jack really have the two sides of this. From the consumer, Jack's the consumer side, and Dan's the merchant side. From the merchant, they want finality of settlement. They want, I've sold you a good. I was working on the campaign. We weren't selling a good, but we got a donation, and we wanted to know that $2,700 was there. Or I sell a good, a cup of coffee, and it's done. But from Jack's perspective, well, I might not have gotten the good or service. I'm going to dispute it. You say that I'm a monthly subscriber to the New York Times. I'm not a monthly subscriber to the New York Times. I don't want to pay the $15 a month because I'm not getting the New York Times, and it's called a chargeback. And so it's really consumers and merchants are a little bit on the different side. But in the U.S., that's part of that 2 3/4%. But merchants would probably in the U.S. at least say, I'd rather not be there, and then it's whether customers are going to push back. Fraud, of course. Privacy, I didn't hear anybody say, but the current payment rails actually in the modern computer age gives everybody along the chain a lot of information about all of us. Now, many of us don't mind it. I still want to use my Visa card. I want to use my bank account. But know that we are all giving up a little bit of our personal identity because they know how we spend. And based on those spending patterns, they can know whether we like guns or not. We don't like guns. And in the political space, there's people sort of look at those things, or how you live your life in many ways. And in good ways, too, because it means they can market to us what books we want to read and what wines we want to drink. But it's privacy as well. Financial inclusion was mentioned. Raheem.
Yeah, to the privacy, the cyber attacks.
Cyber attack.
And identity theft. So I would say this is a big pain point.
So I agree with you. Cyber attacks and so forth. So with all these pain points, the question is, will blockchain help address some of these or all of these? So then we go back to benefits of blockchain. What are the two big benefits that you keep hearing me spout about, from whether it's from Christian Catalini's paper or just Kelly?
The cost of the network and then the cost of the verification.
Yeah. So verification cost and networking cost. We're not going to go back through this, but it's sort of, can lowering the verification costs address basically some of these pain points, including this cybersecurity one? And where does that fit together? I mean, Elon?
I would add, does blockchain add problems? So it may solve some problems, but add other problems, and then we need to net those problems and see if
you're ahead of me. No, it's good. It's good. In fact, I'm going to go. Challenges. Which problems are going to add?
Scalability.
Scalability. What other problems? Brodish, I've heard from over here.
High transaction cost.
High transaction costs on
And it kind of
blockchain.
takes some days to process the transaction. It's slow.
So it's slow. So scalability, slow. It might be high transaction cost, Alexis.
And interoperability.
Interoperability. So it's all our friends. Stephanie?
There's also the issue of error resolution.
Error resolution, good one.
Now, like when consumers are like trying to fix something wrong with like, fraudulent card transaction or something, like with blockchain, if it's immutable, you can't do that.
Right. So it's this trade-off. It's a little bit like what Jack was saying about chargebacks. From the customer side, there might be an actual error. It's a different type of error, but an error, and I want to be able to say, I'm not taking the New York Times any longer. I'm sorry to the New York Times, I'm just picking. But you're saying there could be true error. Shimon, did you have?
Isn't like the core system where we have like these delays, it's not really technological, but sort of it's a business issue in the sense that Spanish penalty opens up a lot of exposure for fraud, so the current level of fraud that we see will probably go up a lot if someone could, game the system, get their cash out at the same time, right? It'd be very hard to trace it back.
So Shimon's raising, maybe we have delayed settlement. Maybe we don't have immediate finality because as a market feature, we kind of want some delayed settlement to protect against fraud, to make sure that there's not errors, as Stephanie says. Maybe there's a delay for business reasons. But Kelly, anybody want to take the other side? I want somebody to take the other side. This Aline.
I mean, I'm biased. I'll admit it, but I think that basically that says let's have an inferior system out there because it's good. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think to some extent you do want, there are benefits to kind of having a delayed settlement, but there are also a lot of benefits on having finality. So why not have both? You don't need to just kind of have an inferior settlement kind of system out there and say, okay, this is the standard. You can also bring another solution right beside it that actually offers finality for people who want.
All right, so if everybody remembers, Aline works at the Digital Currency Initiative, used to work in payments. He's admitting he might have a little bit of a bias, but he's saying, fine, you want some delayed settlement, but shouldn't we have an alternative? Because not every market will want delayed settlement. Eric.
Yeah, but just wanted to tie these two points of view to another challenge, which is issues on the handling of governance. Because in the case of Ethereum, for example, there's a little bit of more elaborate governance of the distributed arrangement of the blockchain. That decision between going from supposedly theft cause a fork. So handling a centralized arrangement is much easier than a blockchain which is a totally distributed arrangement.
So, please, John. Another challenge is the government regulation on the anti-money laundering and the
right. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, Kelly.
I'm not sure if this sort of ties into the finality of it, but one of the articles talked a little bit about the fact that there's an issue with managing liquidity given the speed of the transactions, especially at the corporate level where the value of the transactions are much higher. There's a bit of an opportunity cost trade-off there.
Right. So we're going to chat about that in a minute, about the liquidity in particularly using a cryptocurrency as a bridge between two fiat currencies. But it has somewhat to do with the volatility of cryptocurrencies. But I would say to this point about, I'm coming back to Aline versus Dan, or Shimon, really. I'm sorry, different debate. I think that this new technology is coming along at a time where we can shorten settlement. And a lot of the delayed settlement in payments, in Wall Street, in securities, we used to have that you would do equity trades, transaction day plus 5 days. Before any of us, before I was born too, a long time ago. Then it went to transaction day plus 3. And in Europe, they went to transaction plus 2 days, 2 days for settlement of securities trades, somewhere 10 or 15 years ago. And the US caught up. The US was behind and just went to transaction plus 2 days. But I think technology could be T plus 0 in securities. And in payments, you could go to real-time payments. The US Federal Reserve had a big process where they got public comment. And they're moving towards what's called real-time payments by 2020. Now, maybe it will be adopted in 2021 because it will take longer to roll out. But I think that technology does provide that it will be more options. And in some cases, the markets will stay with delayed settlement because it's just history. It's just legacy. And other times, it will stay with delayed settlement because they actually prefer it. I think in the securities world, some people actually prefer delayed settlement. We'll talk about this in a few lectures, but they prefer it because it allows shorting of securities. When you actually borrow somebody else's security and sell it, you usually sell it before you borrow it. And so the shorting, the whole parts of our capital markets that are built around delayed settlement, because you usually sell, borrow, and settle, rather than borrow, sell, and settle.
What if you put securities lending on a blockchain then, and you were able to immediately point to the borrow that you get and trace that back? Wouldn't you then have securities lending on a T0 and you could short on T0 and know exactly what security you borrowed?
I think that it is technically feasible to move stock borrow onto a blockchain. I'm agreeing with that. But the question is whether the economics of that market, whether the market participants want to actually arrange the borrow before they sell, because currently they sell before they arrange the borrow.
But they have to get the locate on that same day, right?
Well, when it's T plus 2, depending upon, I'm sorry, I'm speaking finance here, but maybe you'll help me.
Well, we had to get, I used to be in sales and trading. We had to get a borrow, like a reference number, before someone shorted something. So they couldn't short. I don't know if it's changed. So I don't know.
No, it might be that I'm the old seasoned dog that was, now that you're saying they're tighter.
Yeah, so
but
if a client wanted to short something, they would call me, and then I would have to call the market maker, get a borrow, put in a reference number, and they would carve off that amount, whatever they wanted to borrow, so it wasn't available for anyone else. And then they sold it. So it was like, it was done on a ledger, but yeah.
So the market may already be moving towards it.
So I worked on the securities lending desk that he used to call. That's what I'm saying. And
there you go.
And that came into effect after 2008 with the no naked short selling. And so then you had to get the locate on T0 on the same exact day that you borrow. But you didn't actually need to borrow the stocks until T3.
You just had to have the locate.
You just need to have a locate on it.
You couldn't double, like, lend.
But I guess my question was, if you moved that securities lending transaction to a blockchain, you could immediately borrow it and be able to trace that. And then when it came to get recall.
So for those of you that are not as close to the world of finance and stock loan and stock borrow, the point of the discussion is that markets have evolved built upon delayed settlement. And the delayed settlement may well have been because they all evolved from paper, not computer days. So we had authorization, clearing, settling in the payment world, but in stock borrow, you had to actually locate a security to sell. It sounds like there's some market evolution post-2008 that you actually had to add an identifier, though you didn't have to borrow. my point is that all of this can be put on a blockchain, but there's also economic market realities as to whether somebody wants to. And I think, let's see, if you're Dan, you don't want chargebacks, but Jack still wants them. And in the delayed settlement, Shimon wants to keep his delayed settlement, and Aline wants to go the other way. And I suspect that in some markets, let's go with Dan and Aline are together, that finality will be important. And what blockchain allows, it allows for the economics of finality to be a fair debate, in a sense, a level, whereas in the past, you couldn't even have the debate because it was so paper intensive. That's where, so blockchain changes that economics. Let me go back a slide and just say why, maybe why is blockchain, what are the possible suitability of payments to the blockchain technology world? And these were some that I threw up. Payment systems use ledgers. Geez, all right, that's the sweet spot. They use ledgers. In fact, that's what Satoshi Nakamoto started this whole thing on. Multiple parties certainly want to read, and in a lot of circumstances, multiple parties want to write to the ledger, like actually record to the ledger. So it's kind of right in the middle of this. You might be able to lower verification costs, but more importantly, verification costs are really critical to the economics of payment. That you have the money that you say you have, or the value. You're sending it to this account and not that account. So in a sense, I look at this and I go, this feels like fertile ground. Fertile ground that hasn't yet been plowed, because 10-year anniversary or birthday, we're still not there. But any other thoughts? I mean, micropayments is another, but Aline, you're the expert.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think is exciting to some of the folks in the DCI, myself included, is the fact that you can attach code to these movements of value. So you can start program these chunks of money.
And are you saying attach code to identify that it's Kelly's payment or it's James's payment, or are you saying identify code in the form of smart contracts?
I mean, basically, smart contract, right? Just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to release the funds if this individual signs and this individual signs at the same time, and then you get the money, right? And that adds an additional layer of complexity that traditional payments of the Visa, MasterCard variety don't have, right? So you get a whole new layer, for lack of a better word, of possibilities. When you start adding, okay, I'm gonna give you something if it's sunny outside. Okay, we can make that happen in real time.
We didn't have a
That eliminates some cost, and I mean, with the visas and whatnot.
You're going to say it a little louder just so we...
I was saying, I get his point, yes, but I mean, it will eliminate the trust issue, which is with the visa.
I'm not sure I get why.
The cost and the transaction movement and the validation, wouldn't that be eliminated? Yes, you have the smart contract, it's adding a layer, but on the other hand, it's eliminating some layers from the other process as well.
Yeah, no. So assuming, so the onus is on the technologies that build this, make sure that you don't lose functionality that you have in a Visa world, because otherwise nobody would use this whole new way of doing payments. So it's assumed that you maintain parity on what the technology offers, and then add additional functionality.
I'm going to say I'm pretty relaxed about the open laptops. I get less relaxed about people texting during class. And I know that we're all multitaskers, but I'm like the most relaxed you can imagine, but I'm starting to get a little on my edge here. Tom.
So I get that blockchain allows for smart contracts, and it's obviously a much more brute force system, but we talk about like attaching code so the payments are automated. I think of like, I set up an automatic payment of my cable bill every month. And so it's like, as soon as that payment comes to me, I've pre-authorized it to go through. And so why can't you, in a non-blockchain setting, establish basically a smart contract that's got some more...
A conditional payment.
Right. So do you have to have a blockchain to have a smart contract?
So sorry if I can respond to that, right? One of the coolest use cases that I've heard, and I'm not going to name any entities, but this blockchain-based, let's say, company, for lack of a better word, who wants to pay their employees, and I said, look, you join me here now. We're gonna make a smart contract that basically is going to pay you for your services for the next 3 years. Period. That's it. There's no additional such and such frequency, right? And we sign a contract now, and that's it. You're going to get paid, right? And then you start working, and you actually have a very insured way that I will get paid, and nobody can stop it, right? Today, you don't have that, right? There are many things that could happen. Managing happens. Whatever happens, I can find a way to kind of get around all of that, right? That's kind of useful to kind of make sure that, hey, I'm going to get paid regardless. That's useful. Right?
So, but you have to then put aside, like if I am your employer, I have to put that 3 years worth of salary into a lockbox, and I can't do anything with it for those 3 years.
You have to escrow it 3 years forward.
It's a limitation. Yeah. Look, but I'm not saying, look, all of this is limitation. It's not like you suddenly have free money. It's all good for everyone, right? But there are useful things that show up, useful things that we never thought about. So all I'm saying is that there are a lot of possibilities, and I don't know the right use case for it. And it's just an example. I thought, like, oh, that's pretty cool. I could use this. But you're right. I mean, there are many implications. But just the very fact that you have a whole new area to explore, to me, that's exciting. Like, we've seen what the system does. We've seen it, right? We bagged 90% of the people. If you're in the 10%, it's kind of sucky. But for the 90%, it kind of works, right? You have T+2. It's awesome, right? But like, we've hit the ceiling of what we can do with this system. Maybe there's an additional approach. Let's see what happens there.
I invited Aline because we needed a little bit more maximalism in the room. I'm sorry, James.
But going back to the point earlier, it's, do we really need blockchain to do a lot of the stuff the smart contracts promise to do? I mean, in the UK, I set up a direct debit. That happens. That just disappears from my account at a certain time period. Doesn't involve blockchain. I can see some benefits of blockchain, but again, a lot of the smart contracts, can we not already use existing systems, make those systems better? And this goes back to the whole payment system. There are a lot of players in the field that hasn't been innovating for the last 20 years, what we read. But can they not make existing systems so much better without the use of blockchain?
So the question is do you really need blockchain, or is it just going to be a catalyst for sort of the legacy systems to kind of do what they otherwise technologically could have done, but it's a kind of sharp kick in the backside to kind of do a little bit better?
That's a really good point, right? That's something that we debate a lot about, and it actually is, as we sit now, it's absolutely possible that this would be the way, right? So one example that shows up frequently is BitTorrent. So BitTorrent, for those of you who don't know, it's a way in which you share video online, and nobody, it has a lot of problems with it, but it catalyzed and changed the entire, distribution of media, right? It was, it had a lot of problems, so it didn't work out the way folks thought it would, but it still kind of changed the whole industry. And it's absolutely possible that blockchains will take that path. It's unclear now, but it's absolutely possible that will.
So blockchain could be just a catalyst like BitTorrent was, and then all of a sudden at the end of the day we got Apple, what do they call it? Apple Store, thank you. But, Zan, were you trying to?
Yeah, well, I was just going to build on that. I think I've already seen that happening. Like, I was looking into Swift recently, and I think after blockchain in the past few years, they launched the Global Payments Innovation Initiative, which seems like, all right, we recognize that our infrastructure is legacy, and we need to do something to kind of keep current. And they've spent and invested a ton of money in like unifying standards across the messaging platform and making it much easier to use. So not a blockchain solution, but has certainly been an advantage.
Right, so it's been a catalyst for Swift. Ripple has been a catalyst for Swift that we're going to talk about in a minute, but others have been as well. But I still would challenge the group, and it's sort of what we're all trying to do here. Are there still opportunities that an append-only log, that you're appending, you're adding information to the registry or the ledger, you're not deleting it, oh, this is going to be good, and you need a consensus of multiple parties writing to the ledger. A special guest.
Hi, Sri. Many of you know me.
Sri, many people might know, is Priya's significant other, husband, I think.
But that's not why he's here.
He's not here. He's here as a payment expert.
No, that's the reason why I'm here.
No, but you are a payment. You want to introduce?
Well, I'm not an expert. I work for MasterCard, and I happen to be Priya's husband as well. I've been in the payments industry for a few years.
Priceless.
Sorry?
Priceless.
Priceless, exactly. We're still running that.
So you're at MasterCard Payments, and give us your thoughts on this.
So I'm actually in the opposite camp from this blockchain and cryptocurrency for a few reasons.
So you're in the minimalist camp.
You call it minimalist. I believe that you can do everything that blockchain promises it does using the current systems we have. There are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is crypto is expensive average per transaction. You can always secure transactions in systems we have today using technologies that exist. So you don't need to have a Bitcoin or a blockchain, as an example. The irrevocability that we're talking about when it comes to Bitcoin and the other kind of advantages about distributed ledgers, everything can be accomplished through the systems we have today. They just don't choose to do it because it's expensive. And it will be expensive when you scale blockchain to the millions of people and other industries we have. It will become expensive there as well. So the two main things that are important in payment systems are acceptance and scale. Simple. If you achieve the acceptance and scale through blockchain, sure, that'll work, and everybody will be using blockchains and bitcoins, and it'll all work. The problem is, it's taken us 40 years to achieve acceptance and scale with Visa and MasterCard and the acquirers and the issuers and this whole ecosystem. It's taken a long time, and it's working. And if you want to replace that with this new system and achieve the same level of acceptance and scale, think about how big of an effort that is. It's almost impossible. And the amount of dollars you'll have to spend on that, why?
Okay.
Right?
So I see if a few people want to take, Hugo, you're going to take the other side?
I can start, sure.
Sure. And then we're going to move on, but I want to hear the other side. And I thank you for being willing to speak up, because it's really helpful. And I don't know your role at MasterCard, but it's just, what's that?
Product management.
Product management. But you're speaking for yourself personally or MasterCard?
MasterCard is dabbling with blockchain as well, so I'm speaking for it personally.
Yeah, because MasterCard actually filed a patent with the U.S. Patent Office for crypto fractional banking.
Yeah.
And Bank of America has 43 patents in the crypto space, and Visa is filed for patents. So you have Visa, Bank of America, MasterCard, and others filing for patents on blockchain, fractional banking, payments, and so forth. So it's sort of an interesting side. We'll get this established. Professor Lessig.
Oh, just one qualification on this. It kind of depends on who you are right now. I mean, because this is all true as a description of banking in the developed world. But to the extent you're talking about these transactions outside of the developed world, then the coefficients on these variables changes significantly. So if you have no reliable legal infrastructure, then the blockchain technology becomes a real plus relative to a world where you have a very reliable infrastructure, which is obviously developed.
So what Larry shared with us is, well, there's a lot of different countries, 180. There's 1.7 billion people still not banked in the world, half of sub-Saharan Africa, for instance. So, there's still a challenge there. I'm sorry, Hugo.
I was going to say something similar. I appreciate the argument, but it kind of sounds like it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, we've spent so much money building this system, so it works now. But let's not look at what technological innovation can happen in the
that's
future.
not what I meant. What I meant was, if it's not broken, don't fix it. We have achieved so much in the payments world over the past 40 years. Improve it while maintaining the goodness of the infrastructure that exists today. Instead of blockchain, it's just a rip and replace the whole thing, which doesn't solve the purpose.
Sure. I don't think that blockchain is the one-stop shop for everything. Like I'm more on like the Bitcoin maximalist side, where I think like, sure, if you have like a global currency where you can go anywhere and use it, and it's it's self-sovereign and you do all that, that would be great. I know like MasterCard and Visa have an interest in saying like, well, we've spent so much money, like you can use MasterCard and Visa most places in the world, but like what happens if you go into like the middle of, I don't know, some village in India or sub-Saharan Africa or wherever, and they don't take a credit card, but they have a cell phone with a Bitcoin wallet, like I can still transact there, and yeah.
You can transact with fiat currency also.
Right. No, but then they have to go through the process of changing that and banking.
So let's take Brodish, and then we'll kind of. This is a good debate, by the way.
Since the discussion came to India, so
yeah. Okay. So we have our expert now.
No, so there is could be a third solution as well. So we have gone through in the readings of the last class as well about the United Payment Interface in India, which is not a blockchain solution. The government of India has actually promoted a new entity called a payment bank, which is like a low frills, no service kind of bank to promote financial inclusion. And based on that, just using a unique identification number and just a mobile device, you can make any sort of payments of any denomination. It can be like a very, very low local currency as well, and you can do all of that at real-time basis without any of these intermediaries, and those are low-cost transactions without leveraging on the blockchain technology.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Do you need an Aadhaar card?
You need an Aadhaar card, which is like more than 95% coverage in the country.
What's the name of the card?
Just you need some form of identification.
Identification. So India's really been at the cutting edge in the last, I'll say, 2 to 3 years. Partly because they could leapfrog some of the card rails. There was not broad adoption or access, as Shreem has talked about in India, for credit cards. And so similar to what we saw in Kenya, and we talked about on Tuesday in China, where companies, private sector, leapfrogged. In India, it was more, if I believe it was the government sector rather than the private sector, said, we want to bring a great many of the population into a system. So they created an ID, a unique ID system. I can't remember the name of each of these. That's the card. They created a payments IMSP, if I have that right.
IMPS was the older one. Now it's UPI. It's United Payment Interface.
A payment system, which is not 270 basis points, but probably is measured in single to low double-digit basis points. Your actual pay, everybody in India, your employment goes into this, and there's biometrics as well to the ID system. Now, there might be cybersecurity risks that this is all then in sense somewhat centralized, but India sort of leapfrogged. It's kind of interesting. But we've had a lively debate. Is finality something we want or not? Is chargeback something we want or not? Can you do this all without blockchain, or is blockchain something that's needed? And of course, the question, even if blockchain's really kind of neat and good, will it just get the incumbents to move a little bit more into innovation and lowering their cost? Do you want to close this one out?
I think we may add something else. It's censorship resistant. So everyone can be exchanging bitcoins without any government forbidding it.
Right.
That's another thing.
Now, it's an interesting thing. You know, if it's censorship resistant to, you must extend me credit, and you can't decide on whether I get credit based on my race or religion or ethnicity and so forth, that's probably something a broad group of people would say that's pretty good. But if it's censorship resistant to being like you can drug traffic, society might say, well, that's not what we want. So it's an interesting set of, when the technology allows you to be censorship resistant, but society says, well, there's still some social cohesion about drug trafficking or child labor, or So, and I'm using the ones that are easy to hold on to. So it's a little interesting debate. Yes.
I think so. When we were speaking about the underdeveloped and developing part of economy and payments and blockchain.
Professor Lessig's
Yes,
comments.
and I think one thing that we haven't addressed is the last mile, which is liquidity. And so even if blockchain addresses, let's say, the accountability or the transfer, what it doesn't address is the actual liquidity and utilization in the last mile on the ground, which is very essential to a developing economy.
Right. I'm sorry, remind me of Aviva. So Aviva, are you saying last mile, like that somebody could actually use this cryptocurrency in a store
Yes.
to buy their grains or their goods for the week?
Right.
To keep their family.
Yeah, so that doesn't solve the problem of adoption and and scalability.
Right. Look, fiat money, and before we had paper money, we had coins and everything. Money is a social construct. We've talked about that. And beyond its advantages that it's used for taxes, and it's good for all debts, public and private in most countries, it really is exactly what Aviva's saying, that society at large says, I will use this as a unit of account, that whether it's my employment or the milled goods I'm buying to feed my family, it's this unit of account that over hundreds of years people adopt until they don't. I don't know how long in Venezuela they'll keep using their currency as a unit of account. So sometimes there's last mile problems even with fiat currency. But I not only hear you, I share your thoughts. You know, that where's the adoption in the last mile, if you well said. So just what are some of the, we talked about the challenges. What are some companies? Well, there's in crypto, and I'm listing 2 or 3, but if you wanted to talk about others, I just listed in crypto, there's startups. BitPay is one of the most popular ones, where it was basically saying to merchants, if you want to take Bitcoin, we'll convert your Bitcoin for you to fiat. I mean, that's in essence what they're doing. So I'm going to take it back to the Hillary campaign. We had some donors that wanted to give us Bitcoin. You know, we're a merchant in a sense, but we also wanted to elect a president, and those donors might want to give us Bitcoin. So one of my colleagues had to investigate, could we take Bitcoin, and what did it mean under federal election law and things like that, and we looked at whether to hire BitPay or somebody like that and so forth. We chose not to because we didn't think there was enough donors who really wanted to give us enough Bitcoin, and we didn't think we would freshen up Hillary's image because we were going to announce she's the Bitcoin candidate or something. Tom, did we miss it? Is this?
Could have won Wisconsin with that.
We could have won Wisconsin with that. Okay. I'm going to be apologizing until my grave for that election, but this is it, right? But it's a real story. One of my colleagues investigated it. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus or anything, but it was just like, oh my gosh, the amount of time we would have to spend with Perkins Coie, the law firm, and what we would have to pay to kind of think this through. And we can only take $2,700, so you know, you'd have to, every day it would be a different number of Bitcoin. It could not be more than $2,700 because there was no way that we were going to break the election laws. So ultimately, the project went away. And the reason I share that story is for a lot of merchants right now, maybe as Aviva said in the last mile, the merchants are saying, I'm not sure I need to do this, but there's a way to do it. If anybody in this room starts a company and you say, I want to take crypto, there are companies out there that will provide you that interface. And their fees, does anybody know BitPay's fees? It wasn't part of the readings, but other than Aline? All right, Aline?
1%.
1%. So if you are a merchant, Starbucks, the Hillary campaign, if you're a merchant and you say, I want to have less than 2.7%, I can have 1% fees. I want finality and I don't want chargebacks, depending upon which side of this you're on. They're trying to just do it as a lower cost solution. 1%. Priya.
Similar story, but maybe with a happier ending. So a lot of
Happier than not winning the election? All right.
So for a lot of philanthropic organizations, this is becoming a very real issue. So the Silicon Valley Community Foundation reported a 30% increase in its endowment due to digital assets donations. And it's happening in a few community foundations as well. It's a growing field of interest. And there's even a story, not a story, it really happened, of one of the exchanges doing this service, converting the digital donations into fiat currency, and it crashed because the volume was just so much. They could not, even like the trickle, they could not keep up. But this is becoming a real thing now.
And whether it's a large foundation or a political campaign, there's also a little bit of reputational risk, because you want to make sure that the funds are not illicit funds. I mean, it just, so there's a little bit of a reputational risk that maybe a Starbucks wouldn't have when you're just buying a cup of coffee. I mean, I've never run a Starbucks, but. So the crypto exchanges and BitPay sort of provide a lot of services. E-wallet companies provide services. Sean?
I'm just curious, how does BitPay manage volatility? How does it cash out?
How does it manage volatility?
Exactly. So it only takes a 1% cut of the transacted value, but the volatility of which can go over 1%, like in a couple of seconds. So in that case, how do they manage?
So they are arranged basically with a number of crypto exchanges. I once knew, but I don't know whether they have arrangements with 3 or 5 or whatever. And they basically are pricing right at so they have sort of close to real-time pricing. So I'm going to buy a cup of coffee. The way the technology works, and let's say it's, what's a Starbucks cup of coffee? It's $5? It's pretty expensive, isn't it?
Depending on what you buy.
What's your cup of coffee?
$2.25.
$2.25, all right. But in real time, the BitPay app is computing what that is, and they feel that within the seconds for them to convert out, they take volatility risk. Is it possible that they, in some transactions, earn the volatility eats up the whole 1%? Yes, but they basically they have that in their pricing model, and then move basically Priya's Bitcoin to dollars, and the dollars goes to Starbucks, and they guarantee Starbucks, $2.25 minus 1%. So. Then there's startups actually getting in. But most of these, at least the second, third, and fourth, are kind of institutional services. Now, there might be retail services that I'm not. Quorum was started by JP Morgan. I think it might even still be owned by JP Morgan. It was going to be spun out. But R3, Ripple, these are really institutional, almost B2B or financial firm to financial firm right now. I couldn't find a really good startup in the retail space, but 2 weeks from today, you're going to have Jeff Sprecher and Kelly here, and you can, Shreem, are you going to be back on November 15th? No? But you'll be able to challenge, well, what they're going to have a retail payment system in their Bitcoin. So it'll be interesting. One retail payment solution is if anybody walks over to building E14, there's a vending machine in the Media Lab right now that takes Bitcoin. Thank you, MIT. Thank you, the Digital Currency Initiative. Thank you, Aline. But there is literally, do you want to describe it? Do you put a QR code up?
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. So anyone who wants to do that, we can walk over there and look at it. It has cross-chain swaps, so you can transact real time between 3 different currencies. And,
so you can take Bitcoin,
Litecoins, and dummy US dollars, we call it. But it's it's basically a stable coin. It's a stable coin.
So Bitcoin, Litecoin, and a stable coin, and there's a vending machine sitting in the Media Lab. You put a QR code up, if I remember.
So QR code on the machine, you scan. We published an app on Android and iOS, and you basically, you scan your home node or your computer. You allow your phone to control your computer, and then you can send money from your phone to your vending machine, real time.
But in that case, the vending machine receives the Bitcoin.
No, so we actually added a Arduino as well that converts the Bitcoin into impulses that trick the machine to say these are coins. So the vending machine actually gets, we tell them how many. Yeah.
There you go. Check it out over in the Media Lab. It was rolled out for Media Lab Members Week, actually, 2 weeks ago. So, and then there's incumbents. ICE is startup backed. I do put MasterCard on there, Shreem. I do, but it's remarkable how many patents are being filed. Hundreds of patents are being filed, but they're almost all by the incumbents. Now, is that because they want to block others from getting in? Or are they trying to create barriers to entry? Or are they doing it because they see real prospect and opportunity and they want to pursue it? It's probably a bit of both. Larry, you're shaking your head.
It's all barriers to entry.
It's all barriers. You don't think it's any?
No, it's all barriers to entry, and then the argument's like this. Our system's great, and guess what? The legal cost of pursuing your system is going to be through the roof. So.
And we'll get some patents along the way.
No, those patents are the legal costs.
Yeah.
That's the point. The threat of the patent litigation is enough to stop any. So if you're a venture capitalist and they walk in like the night before your announcement, you're dead.
Yeah. Well, Bank of America has 43, so in the blockchain space, I read.
Strategy in every major incumbent context. So there's nothing new here.
Yeah. So is it a sign that there's something really real here, that the startups might have something, to be figured out? Visa started a business-to-business payment connect in 2016. They've even announced, Visa's even announced it hasn't had a lot of adoption. They're not sure. I think it's more permission than permissionless, by the way. But this is kind of, now is anybody in their own readings, maybe Aline? I mean, I'm not trying to be exhaustive, but there's not a lot of, because of some of these issues back here, these are real challenges, but I would say these are real possibilities too. Kelly and then Aline.
So what about some of the companies that sort of backed out? Like in our reading, Stripe ended their exploratory program. It sounded like a pretty defeated situation, but I don't really understand that much exactly why. But
You want to answer the Stripe question?
Yes, I mean, Stripe is not Bitcoin. Stripe wanted to maybe use Bitcoin as a service. I mean, they're clients, they're not the startup. So I think backing up it makes sense because they're clients. But there's many startups out there that are still here not picking up.
Yeah, and just as background, Stripe is a payment system provider. So they're not extending credit like a Visa or MasterCard, or they're not a network like Visa and MasterCard, who actually, they don't provide the credit the banks do, but they are a payment system provider that merchants would hire Stripe to interface with MasterCard, Discover, American Express, and others. But why did Stripe decide not to continue on this? Partly they didn't see a lot of adoption, is what I took. But Aline, you were going to answer.
Yeah, just a couple of things I want to add. So this is a great list. I think it's a great starting point. The rule that I think at some point 3 months ago I had was in the cryptocurrency space, most non-speculation money, so not like I'm going to buy low, sell high, is coming from either exchanges or miners. You got
exchanges or mining.
Yes, so that's where the money's made. If you don't speculate, you're either a miner and you make money, or an exchange and make money. The miner that I think would be interesting, I would put Bitmain over there because I think it's Bitmain. So Bitmain, for those who don't know, is going through an ICO, IPO. Initial, the good old plan. Yep. They have a lot of money. They're going to be valued at a very hefty rate. They want to start producing AI chips, artificial intelligence chips, right? So they're very good at producing chips, and they will go. They're going through one of those.
But is Bitmain in the payment space, using blockchain for payments?
I mean, they've invested in Circle, which is another exchange. So they're like, I mean, they have a lot of money. They're trying to kind of place it towards other companies. So yeah, so exchanges of the Binance or all these other folks, there are a lot of exchanges that make money, and the other ones are.
So I want to talk a little bit about cross-border. On Tuesday, we put up a complex chart. I don't need to go through that again, but we all know, and there's a lot of people here that probably send money back. When you're moving something overseas, you're moving from one fiat to another fiat currency. It takes some time, and the banking system over centuries has formed a way to do that, to move from one money to another, or as we say, one ledger system to another ledger system, through correspondent banking. And correspondent banking is a reasonably concentrated business. One student sent in the group chat last night that there's only really 10 banks in this field. I don't know if that's accurate, by the way, but it is a very concentrated business because they're large international banks. Whether it's 10 or 20, it's, and they can charge a little excess. Because they have to have correspondence. They have to have relationships with all the local banks, and they're taking some credit risk, the correspondent banks standing in between, some credit risk of the local banks on both sides in the U.S. and so forth, and in, let's say, Mexico, if it's between the U.S. and Mexico. So one idea that's been around, it's widely associated with Ripple, but it's not only associated with Ripple, is this simple chart. What if I move fiat to crypto and crypto to fiat? This is called a bridge crypto or bridge currency. I can sort of say I can go from US dollars to Bitcoin or XRP. You fill in the middle and then move over to the other fiat, Mexican peso in my example. And might that take some cost out of the system? We have Sean's issue earlier of volatility. If the crypto is fluctuating a lot, that causes some issues. If there's a lot of cost or friction, because now you're doing two currency exchanges, not one. I'm calling crypto a currency for this purpose. I know that crypto is not technically a currency, but for this moment, let me just call it, you have two currency exchanges, and thus you have two bid-ask spreads to pay. Just the market makers, you need to pay the bid-ask spreads twice, and you have some volatility if the middle crypto is moving around. But this simple diagram is a big part of what Ripple is trying to create with X Rapid, right? X Current is a messaging app of Ripple's, and it's competing with Swift. And it has some reasonable adoption. A lot of banks are starting to use it. But don't confuse that with another product, which is an interesting product that kind of does this, that goes fiat to crypto, crypto to fiat. So what problem, what pain points would this be solving if it worked in the cross-border? Anybody want to remind the class what Tom?
Well, this reduces the number of intermediaries. You don't have to have your bank engage with a correspondence bank, which engages with a local bank, which then it sort of...
All right, so it might, I'm going to say it might lower the intermediation because you still have on the two fiat sides a bank, a local bank and a bank, and to do the crosses, you need some market-making function, which in Ripple's case, they try to build into the application. And they have market makers to provide liquidity. There was a question, somebody mentioned liquidity, some liquidity. But it might lower the numbers of intermediaries. What else might it do?
And there's usually between exchanging currencies, there's a balance between like the settlement time and like the fee that you pay. So if you want quick settlement, you have to pay a higher fee. Or you can accept like a lower fee, but it takes multiple days sometimes to change over. So potentially it could solve that.
So this is basically a way that you can shorten the settlement times. This can be done literally in seconds. I'm not saying that you wouldn't pay a little extra for it, but this can be done very quickly if you have arrangements. So some contend, and I've spoken to them at conferences and so forth, that big corporate treasuries are going to try to do this, that the treasury function of Apple and others might take this up. The big banks say that's ridiculous. The big banks say, no, we can provide real-time cross-border cash movement between dollar and euro and dollar and yen, and you don't need to interpose something in the middle.
Wouldn't that require huge amounts of cash reserves to be able to protect against volatility, and not only the volatility of the crypto, but the volatility of the actual fiat for that particular country?
So the question is, will it need a lot of liquidity, basically? You used a different word maybe, but reserves. But somebody who can make markets in size in crypto versus fiat and crypto versus fiat. I think the answer is yes in terms of the only probably token right now that has enough liquidity in it to do this in size is probably Bitcoin. Even though Ripple is promoting this, and it's sort of a interesting technology. They have a software XRapid that you can do this right now. They're promoting on XRP, but is there enough liquidity? Could you move more than $1 million? Probably not. You probably couldn't move a $100 million payment without moving the market a lot. Shimon.
So, back to finance. I mean, the only way
So back to finance, it's good from a finance professor.
The way this will work is sort of subject to the cost of arbitraging this, right? You don't care about the value of XRP, provided that you're not validating arbitrage relationships between the two fiats, right?
That's correct.
So whatever those frictions are, you won't be able to go underneath them. And if you're Apple, I don't want to see the treasury business case. If you're Apple and you're banking with JP Morgan Chase, I mean, they're probably quoting you, bips. I mean, like, what is the two major currencies? The spread is like in bips.
A BIP is 1/100th of a cent, basically. I mean, it's very tiny.
I'm not sure that I understand that.
So the proponents, and then we'll come back, the proponents of this say, yeah, JP Morgan might solve Apple's needs between dollar euro, but are they really doing it between, kind of dollar peso or dollar Kenyan currency?
Let's say they're not, and the spread there is 10 basis points, 50 basis points. Well, that's going to be, by construction, the spread, that's going to be the violation of arbitrage that will be allowed if you go that way too.
Right. So Shimon's saying there's maybe a cost and friction. I think the proponents of this would also say there's a friction in time, that moving from dollars to peso. Remind me your first name.
My name is Santosh. Well, that's definitely true even in pesos or any currency. Like all these quotes that anyone's getting are like extremely tight. But there's still a problem like weekends, for example. Weekends, they're just not quoted at all. So like if there's a major event that's happening over a weekend that's going to change the value of your asset or your currency, then you can't trade until Sunday night when Hong Kong opens. And so there's still like these like a 36-hour time period that is completely unsolved during the week.
So the worldwide currency markets are depending upon banks, and banks do actually have holidays. I know it's sometimes hard to believe, but and so there's a question of friction, which Shimon would say even if it costs you 0.5%, it better get inside of that. There's a question of settlement delay. This could be faster, but you're saying they could change that. JP Morgan can change that. And then there's weekends. Do you have a 160-some-hour week? I'm going to go to Alexis and back here.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because this system, at the end of the day, it depends on the two FX rate, on the two fiat rate, on the normal markets, right?
Right.
So even if we can't trade on a Sunday, the rate is going to change on the platform based on the the assumption of what the rate is going to be tomorrow. It's going to adjust. Normally, you should adjust, right? Because as has been raised before, that just for no arbitrage to take place. So even if it's possible, doesn't this system like add more risk in terms of like two different risks, fiat crypto, crypto fiat, and just because there will always be the underlying risk of fiat to fiat because it's always based on a like price on the private.
Can I hold your question because I want to see if the other yours comes in. I got it. It's the risk.
I was just going to bring up the accessibility for, non-first world countries or unbanked countries, and I would be less concerned about moving over, moving like a yard, and like be more concerned about like, okay, well maybe I have to transact like sub $100.
Do you want to translate for the room what a yard is? My Goldman Sachs days, I knew what a yard is, but some of the non-bankers.
It's $1 billion.
$1 billion. Now you can work on, what trading floor did you work on? Citi. Now you can work on Citi. A yard is $1 billion on Goldman Sachs' floor too.
Yeah, hopefully.
We measured it differently, yeah.
But I think it's, if you wanted to transact maybe like under $100 from, dollars to, whatever, no large bank is gonna open an account and do that for you. You're gonna have to do that like a commercial bank if you have access to it. There's a really wide spread there. So if you can do this through an app, through a stable coin or Ripple or whatever, you're gonna be able to do it for cheaper if you're making like micro transactions.
So I'm going to react and then try to bring it all together and summarize. It's the last slide. So, Alexis' point about risk, I agree. I think that all of these points are valid, that there is additional costs. There's 2 hops in this example, and there's additional risk. So the real business case question is there enough value added on the other side? Are you shortening settlement cycles? Can you do it on the weekends when you otherwise couldn't do it? Could you move small dollar amounts, maybe retail? Because Western Union still charges something like 8 to 10% to do cross-border remittances. So send some money to the Philippines and do it only for a couple of $100, and you're probably spending 10%. Could somebody build inside of those types of, now, $200 movement, 10% is $20. You still have to bring transaction costs down, fixed transaction costs down. But if you can bring the fixed transaction cost down and have enough liquidity, it's kind of I wouldn't count this out. I'm one who sort of doubts it will be in the heart of treasury function that Apple will be using it between dollar and euro. But I want to say that there's the wide spectrum. It's just an interesting, can crypto be a bridge currency, and might it be in the world of stable value? I mean, this was a good discussion because this is what the rest of the semester is about. We're going to take use case by use case and really debate. And through it, the learning objective is for all of us to leave with a little critical reasoning skills about when does an append-only log with consensus amongst multiple parties and maybe a native token make sense. That's usually called blockchain, but Aline doesn't let me call it blockchain technology anymore. Next Tuesday is Election Day. So I'm going to make my pitch. If you're a U.S. citizen, please vote. If you're not, I'm not going to ask you to vote, but please vote. Participate in our incredible thing called democracy. But we're going to talk about central bank digital currencies. And so I think we're doing this over 2 sessions as well. So next Tuesday is going to be a lot about central banking and so forth. So thank you. Happy anniversary, Bitcoin.